Welcome back to GMP Scenario, presented by PharmaContentLabs.com, where we break down common GMP mistakes, inspection risks, and the small control gaps that turn into big observations.
All right, if you're working in any kind of regulated lab, listen up. This is one of those cautionary tales you really need to hear. We're going to dive into how a super simple system update can just spiral out of control into a massive compliance crisis. And, maybe more importantly, how you can stop it from happening to you. So, let's start at the beginning, where these stories always do, with what looks like a totally harmless update. So, the whole story kicks off with something that honestly happens every single day in labs all over the world. A LIMS, that's your Laboratory Information Management System, gets a routine software upgrade. Nothing to see here, right? Just normal, necessary IT stuff. And at first glance, everything looked totally perfect. The lab staff, they just kept on doing their thing, entering results, running samples, and the system was doing its job, churning out certificates of analysis, no errors popped up, no red flags. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it seemed like it was working like a charm.
But was it really? This, right here, is where our normal, everyday story takes a really sharp turn. Because what was happening behind the scenes? Whoa, that was a completely different picture.
Let's really break down what happened next, because this is just a classic textbook example of a hidden system failure with some absolutely massive implications.
So, the problem didn't actually surface until the quality assurance team started digging around. As they were doing their routine checks, they started noticing these little inconsistencies, just things that didn't quite add up.
And what they found was wow, a huge difference between what they expected and what actually happened. The expectation that this upgrade wouldn't touch any of the core configurations, but the reality? It was alarming. This upgrade had, completely behind the scenes, changed how calculations were done, it updated critical reference ranges, and it even reset user permissions. And the worst part? It was all done without any documentation or revalidation.
Which brings us to the big, crucial question. The one that, let's be honest, every lab director has nightmares about. In the world of good manufacturing practices, is this just a little IT hiccup, or is it a catastrophic compliance failure?
Okay, let's be crystal clear about just how serious this is. We're not talking about a small problem here. This is a full-blown crisis. This is the kind of failure that leads to product recalls, massive regulatory fines, and a complete and total loss of trust in your lab's data. So, the verdict? It's unambiguous. This is a major, major failure. Any undocumented, unvalidated changes to a critical system like a LIMS, well, that strikes right at the heart of your data integrity and all the trust the regulators put in you.
And to really get why, we just have to remember what GMP is all about in the first place. It is the entire framework designed to make sure products are safe, they're effective, and they consistently meet quality standards. And the whole thing relies on control, documentation, and validation.
And that is exactly why the LIMS is so incredibly critical. It is not just another database, it's the actual backbone of the lab's quality system. It controls literally everything, from tracking a sample, to calculating the data, to the audit trails that prove who did what when. And ultimately, it's responsible for that final certificate of analysis and the integrity of all your data.
So here's the bottom line. If those changes aren't properly managed and validated, your data just becomes untrustworthy, period. Every single report, every COA, every result that system spits out is now completely in question.
So, how in the world do you prevent this nightmare scenario from happening at your lab? Well, it all comes down to having a really solid validation blueprint in place long before you ever even think about touching the system. Okay, so think of it like this. There are 3 essential pillars to getting this right. Pillar number 1, you have to define the system's intended use. That means mapping out every single critical workflow from the moment a sample logs in to when that final COA is generated. Second, you validate the configuration itself. You're verifying calculations, you're locking down who has access to what, you're making sure audit trails are on. And finally, number 3, you manage all upgrades with a formal change control process. This has to include risk-based regression testing, which is really just a fancy way of saying you rerun specific, important old tests to make absolutely sure the new update didn't accidentally break something that was working just fine before. Now, doing all that work is really only half the battle. In a regulated world, you know the saying, if you didn't document it, it didn't happen. That paper trail is everything. It's your only proof of compliance.
So what does that documentation actually look like? When an inspector walks through your door, what are they going to be asking for?
So here's your checklist. This is the stuff you absolutely have to have. It all starts with a User Requirements Specification, or URS. Honestly, think of this as your Bible for what the system must do. Then you need a risk assessment, and of course, the actual test scripts and the results. Did it pass or did it fail? You also got to have a user access matrix to control who can do what, a solid plan for reviewing those audit trails, and finally the big one, the formal signed-off approval for release. This whole package, that's your evidence.
Now, to really, truly understand the stakes here, let's look at this whole mess from the one perspective that matters most when it comes to an audit, the inspectors. This quote really gets to the heart of the whole problem. The single most common mistake that labs make is treating their LIMS like it's just another piece of office software. It's not just an IT tool. It is a core GMP system, and it has to be treated with that level of rigor and control.
And you better believe they have a very specific and very effective way of testing your system's integrity. It's a method they use almost every single time because it just cuts right to the chase.
An inspector, they always start at the end. They'll grab a final certificate of analysis, find a really critical result, like this potency value right here, 99.8%, and they will start working their way backward.
And here's how they do it. It's a tried and true process. First, they're going to point to that 99.8% value and say, show me. Show me exactly how this system calculated this. Then, they'll want to see the raw data that was fed into that calculation. And you can bet that finally, they will dig deep into the system controls and the audit trails to prove that the data is secure and nobody has messed with it. If you can't connect all those dots for them, right then and there, you fail the audit. Simple as that.
So, that leaves us with the one big question you need to take back to your own organization. How do you really treat your LIMS? Is it just another piece of software that IT manages? Or is it respected, controlled, and validated like the absolutely critical GMP system that it is? Because honestly, the answer to that question, that's what's going to determine whether or not you pass your next inspection.
If this helped, like and subscribe.